incredibly beautiful way that he loved with my dad, George Metzel. I wasn't my biological dad, and yet many times that happens, which is sad, you know. But in all of that, God redeems every bit of it. God can bless whatever your experience has been, whatever has been special, whatever. In connection with Romans chapter 3, which at the first week I was thinking, I don't know how that works, but he showed me how. It's pretty amazing how he always does it. I'm like, well, I'll be dang. He did it again, you know. So this morning, I say Happy Mother's Day to all of you. I say Happy Mother's Day to my mom. I love you very, very much. I've shared many times how I know I've never had a moment of my life where I didn't know God's love, because he showed me through her, etc. So we understand that. But one of the things that God did when he created male and female was he placed certain characteristics, and it's a fluid, etc. So we understand that. But one of the things that God did when he created male, be going, oh, I don't even know what you're talking about, you know, and she does these. She goes, come here, to Grace or Luke. And I'm like, get away from me. Don't be doing that to me. And she's like snuggling with them, It's part of the uniqueness of God and how he gets to mankind in his unique way. And he did it together because they need the one that is going, no, and the other one's going, oh, yes, they're fine, and all that balance and all that he endowed into parenthood. But there's something about a mom and the way she loves her child. I shared a minute ago, and I try to decide, how much to get into it, and I'm going to delve in there a little bit. So Jan and I, in adopting our children, we didn't have the physical, natural experience. God had a different plan for us. And for many times, for females who haven't had that route, many times Mother's Day is a tough day. It can be. Until we wrap our arms around, this is God's plan for us. And he has a plan for us, and it's good. It's good. We don't get less, we get different. And different is good. In charge, and when he's writing the story. And as I would watch Jana loving on Luke and loving on Grace and pouring her love into them, no matter what, all the time, in ways that I couldn't, because that's how God made her, to pour into them and to carry certain burdens and difficulties and so forth when they weren't ready to. All of that is an example of what he does for mankind. He loved us when we were incapable of loving him. God did that. And he sent his son when we were incapable. And so in the picture of parenthood, he loved us when we were incapable of loving him. God did that. And he sent his son when we were incapable. And so in the picture of parenthood, he gives us an opportunity that is beyond our ability to even wrap our minds around. Now, well, in my life, those things over there were really important. Okay? And so what she did, she saw that. And she was like, okay, in my life, those things over there, working on it, I kept getting stuck down there, towards the bottom. I'd skip a line or two in there, and, so I'd go and I'd try and say it to her, and, no, we're not there yet. So I'd be going back, and I'm going over it, and this whole process, the Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He makes me to lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside still waters, all that, and I'm little, and it's being put in there. And I don't know that my motivation was just perfected at that point. I'm just going to say it. But I'm 56, and it's still in there. And it was beginning a journey. And I was probably pretty good. I was probably better. I could tell you, Cliff Harris, he played football, played safety at Ouachita Baptist College. A lot of people can't even say that word. I could say Ouachita Baptist when I was like 5. John Nyland, he was a first-round pick, right guard for the Dallas Cowboys. Bob Lilly, first Cowboy ever taken. And then my number one guy, Roger Staubach, Captain America. Buddy, I knew he was at Navy and fought in Vietnam and had read like 21 books of his in elementary school and all that. And all those things, Mom went to my dad and she was like, I'm kind of nervous about how much he's into all this stuff. Isn't it getting a little out of proportion? This thing, we're trying to get him to memorize scriptures, and he's like, oh. And he told her, take a deep breath. God's doing something. And all the memorization skills that were going on from reading the back of a football card, at one point in time, began to remember scriptures and the order of importance began to tilt. You see, this love for his word was being, and the order of importance began to tilt. You see, me, as he was birthing a desire for his word. And that is what we've been talking about, isn't it? We've been talking about, as the body of Christ, Lord, help us get in the Word more. Help us get in the Word. I don't know what it is, parents trying to get your kid or whatever. It's probably not football cards for them. I don't know what it is. But God will speak to you and how to get them in. And how to make what those things mean as a part of something you discuss. Back in the day, we sat at the table. Doesn't happen as much in this era where you sit around and you talk about stuff and whatever. Okay, so we can gripe about how things are different now than they were before and whatever. Let's get over that. Let's go, all right, so where are we and where can we get it? How about that? You have to sit around griping and fussing about how things were better in the past. How about assess where you are now and go, okay, Lord, show us where to have these conversations. Where is that? He will. He will. One of the mom used to say that God taught her another very important time was right before. She'd come in, sit down, tell me about your day. Now, I liked getting my back rubbed. And I knew the longer I could keep her talking, the longer that was. And she would speed up she had this pattern of when she was about to stop, and she'd kind of go faster, and I'd know, it's about 10. I'd go, hey, well, what about, you learn how to get this thing going. And I'd get her hooked. I'd be like, oh, yeah, okay, I got her for another little while here, But a lot of good topics that shared in those saying the Word. That was always the answer, even when we didn't know. Well, I don't know. We're going to have to find the answer to this. What's in the Word? That's the standard. when we grow up that way, it puts us in a position to have security, to have success. Not success financially or in always winning your ball game or in whatever, but you have success in what God is calling you to. Whatever God's calling you to, you can have success in that because it's grounded in Him. And He never fails. He may let you fail. He may let me fail. In fact, He does that way more than I would prefer. He may let you fail. He may let me fail. In fact, He does that way more than I would prefer. But it's in those times of failure that I see His success, which you're going to see kind of come in again here in just a second. Don't worry. Or a grandma. Or a teacher. You know, I had a third grade teacher, Betty Oakberg. Unreal. Amazing. She lived to like 100 and something, 103. I mean, she passed away just a few years ago. It was amazing. She looked like she was 78 when I had her, you know, and she just passed away a few years ago. That was, I think, just that era. I don't know. But anyway, amazing lady. She had that spark in her eye, you know, that twinkle. And she knew how to get me. And she got me. She had me eating out of her hand. And things I didn't want to do, I'd do it because she wanted me to. You know, that was that same thing that He does in a mom. That life and that love and that relationship. I didn't want to read. I mean, I really did not want to read. I wanted to go play. I wanted to go anything physical. I wanted to go do that. I did not want to read. So, again, I'm sure God worked in her and let her realize my affinity for the Cowboys and stuff. So she held me after school, takes me to the library, just me and her, and shows me this section of books that was like this long, and all of them were about football and basketball and baseball and all that. I was like, oh my gosh, I didn't even know that was in here. So I see that He is good. Start going, Lord, I don't really know if I've experienced that. Let me have that experience. I want to know You like that. Introduction there. So verses 3 through 7. All right, and we're going to tie all this to what we're saying. First of all, it's the love of His Word that gets us in here. It's that passion, it's that hunger to know what He's saying that takes us to His Word and causes us to go, I want to know what that means. I'm not just going to read over it because I can go, well, you know, I didn't just read one verse today. I read 4 verses today. Well, good for you. You know, where was your heart in all that? I want to know Him better. All right, so let's review for a second that we have the Christian church, all right, and in the Christian church in the first century, in this letter in Rome where Paul is writing, he's writing to 2 specific groups. The Jews who have become Christians and the Gentiles who have become Christians. The Jews have all this rich heritage. They have the law, they have the covenant, they have circumcision, you know, and all this with God and all this history. These Gentiles, they got a mix mash of stuff that is based in whatever was wherever they lived. Okay, and their pantheism and all their different gods and goddesses and so forth. And so now you got them all together and Paul's writing them. Okay, that's who we're talking about and who we're talking to. So last week, you know, we were reading Paul in this segment of chapter 3. He begins doing this thing where he's writing this letter and he's writing the argument that some of the Jews are having to him, and then he's answering them. Okay? So as he's writing this, he could just write a letter that he knows some of them are going to be arguing with him about things. So he starts telling them that circumcision isn't the issue. It's not just the physical act, that the physical act represented a spiritual act. It was so much deeper. And so he's already jumping to what they're going to say in return of, so what then is the advantage of being a Jew? All these hundreds of years, we're supposed to be his chosen people. Why do we even have an advantage of having all this in the past? What value is there in circumcision? And so Paul answers them and he says, much in every way. First of all, the Jews have been entrusted with the very words of God. And so I'm reviewing quickly here and reminding us, because we're going to continue this train of thought. The thing that Paul was trying to get them to say is, understand, guys, how can you say, what advantage is there to be a Jew? You're his chosen people. You have known him for all these years. You know how she's not going to quit when things get hard. And I know the things she enjoys, and I know there's things that, I know when I try and run through the house with a wrinkled shirt, that's not going to go well. I'm like, honey, nobody cares. She's like, oh yes, no, we're not doing that. I don't care, but she does. Because I know her. Okay? There is so much value. And that's what Paul is saying to them. There is huge advantage in having all the blessings. You've been given and trusted with the very words of God. What do you mean? Is there an advantage? All right, so we're going to move from there. That's verse 2 of chapter 3 into verse 3. All right, so here's another argument that Paul presents, not from him, but he's saying they've seen all of the blessings of God. They've seen him create water out of for God. I'm unfaithful. Things I fail at for God, I'm unfaithful. Things didn't go so well in the church we were in, and things didn't go so well in the church we were in, and I could pick a lot. 2 Thessalonians 3:3. But the Lord is faithful. He will establish you and guard you against the evil one. I'm just telling you, these are scriptures that are good to memorize. He's already lost. That is what is true. So we look at another one. How about Lamentations? You spent time in Lamentations lately? So it's just, but you may have sang this song. It's a song that's pretty popular. And you declare the truth, and you will see his faithfulness. You will see it. He doesn't change with our feelings. He doesn't change with our circumstances. He never changes. So there can be some time in your life where, man, you feel him and you feel blessed and you feel loved and so forth. And then there may be another time where you feel like you're at the bottom of the Grand Canyon and your prayers are somewhere getting lost in the ozone layer or whatever else, or the ceiling is knocking them back down or whatever. He hasn't changed. He hasn't changed. He is the same yesterday, today, forever. We hold on to that. God is faithful. Psalm 36:5. Your steadfast love, O Lord, extends to the heavens, your faithfulness to the clouds. It's a praise. We're declaring the truth in the midst of challenge. We're not going to sow it. We're not going to put it into the ground. Somebody did it. Thank the Lord. Because in order to receive a harvest, you have to plant. You have to put it in there. That's what we're to do with his word. Put it in there and allow him to bring it to harvest. His Spirit will do that. Okay, let's go back to Paul and some of the arguments. He's knowing that the Jews are going to be arguing back with him. In verse 5, he says, but if our unrighteous perfections, well, then I'll just be imperfect. And then everyone will see God's perfection better. That's like, yeah, whatever, buddy. That's not going to carry weight of his judgment that way. You don't get to say, well, I'll just keep doing wrong because then everybody sees God better. That's not how that works. And it just disgusts him to even go out God's righteousness more clearly than what shall we say. And he's saying if that were true, then God couldn't judge his people. Okay? And he will judge his people. So he answers it in 6 through 7. He says, certainly not. Okay? I mean, he's being very emphatic with these people. These are issues that they're wrestling with. They're using things like as an excuse to not do what God is saying. They're playing theological games, basically. Certainly not. If that were so, how could God judge the world? Someone might argue, if my falsehood enhances God's truthfulness and so increases his glory, why am I still condemned as a sinner? That's what he's saying. That mindset is completely wrong. It's completely wrong, and he's calling it to account.